1. In my mid-20s, I work for a multinational accounting firm. I'm female and have always had a real firm policy for standing up when something doesn't sound right. Irrelevant if it puts me in an awkward position. This story is how I maliciously complied and in turn made my director learn a lesson I hope she won't forget. Background on Karen. When she joined the team, we all liked her. She made great changes and we got on well with her. But the moment she was promoted to director and had direct reporting to the partner, she flipped. Became a completely different person and made our life hell. Previously, she spent her career heading up call centers, which was really evident in her management style, and for some reason made it her mission to cut costs in the team and go under budget. This affected everything, from telling us we didn't have a stationary budget for pens and had to take from other teams' stores to only allowing a one-drink, one-course policy on team dinner events. This was a huge company, and other teams around us would go for fancy, all-expenses-paid social events, so we felt pretty put out. Her cost-cutting also extended to things like no overtime approvals unless way in advance. That didn't last long, as we understaffed so quickly emergencies weren't dealt with, and hiring school leavers instead of graduates, as they were cheaper despite the work needing more experience. Her favorite saying to everything was, "It's policy," or blaming HR or higher-ups, saying whatever new thing, even if a new irrelevant spreadsheet, would come from HR. Honestly, the amount of time HR spent on our little team in a company with 20,000 plus UK employees was astounding. Then came the day she booked an all-day training session from some external company to show us how to use a new system. She went on about it for weeks, was super excited that she had brought in this new system. The training was intense, so freaking technical, mind-numbing, and most of all, expensive. So what would normally be covered over a few days was crammed into one full day. They were paid hourly. Shock. She sent an email advising how we were expected to attend. It will go through the whole day and lunch would be provided, but it will be a working lunch, so training would also be through lunch. Needless to say, the thought of sitting in a stuffy room for 8 hours without a lunch break wasn't appealing. I asked for an exception, as I really relied on going outside for the hour at lunch for a break. I was in the midst of high anxiety at the time, and my breaks got me through. She said, "It's policy," that we would be expected to change our workday around and fit training, and there is no policy that requires her to allow me to go out. I had an issue. I should check the HR manual. I think until now this statement usually worked for her, as no one really ever checked. I went one better. I went to HR. Cue malicious compliance. Using the effective working of "for my mental health and well-being," HR replied, and of course disagreed, as UK law mandates training as work and an 8-hour day require at least 1 hour break, which I'm allowed to choose what I do with. They CC'd Karen. Karen backed down but verbally told me it was an exception for me and not to share with the rest of the team. Of course I didn't comply. She was breaking the law. So I showed the email chain to everyone as they were complaining about the same thing. So me and the rest of the team come up with a little plan. Sandwiches were delivered. Budget sandwiches, of course, from the supermarket down the road, instead of our slightly more expensive internal catering team who caters for this exact type of thing for our 10-floor building. I stood up and announced I was going on lunch and would be back in an hour. Cue the rest of the team, all 12 standing up after me. Karen goes, "Where are you all going?" To which someone replied, "I understand that HR said we're allowed to leave the room for the hour for lunch." The look on her face. She knew she was stuck. She couldn't say anything. We left her in there alone with 2 trainers who seemed to guess something was up. I have never felt more satisfied in my life. We all had a good laugh about it outside. I think I even did a happy dance. She also knew she couldn't complain to me about it, as that would highlight her breaking the rules. I felt like I was walking on air all day. After this, there was much less blaming of HR, and generally she was a little skittish around me because she knew I didn't take her crap and would call her out. A second training session had to be booked, since the training would never have worked in one day. There were lots of moans and groans about how expensive the extra training session costs, of course. I left a couple of months afterwards, and so did pretty much the rest of my team, replaced by school leavers, of course. But I'm very glad I complied. I believe Karen still works there, but for a much smaller team. 2. I'm a 31-year-old female. I've been going back and forth with my husband, 37, for the last 3 years since he cheated on me with his boss's daughter right after she turned 18. We were there when she turned 18, and she moved here from Seattle, and needed friends, so she kind of clung to us. She started saying she saw us as parent figures, and so she spent a lot of time around us. We were pretty much alcoholics at the time, drinking, camping, whatever. Since I was on unemployment for COVID and getting a ridiculous amount of money monthly. Naturally, we decided not to be responsible but to party it away, and we pretty much lived in the woods for like 4 months at one point with her and several other people, but I digress. The girl started sleeping with all my husband's co-workers, and I had a feeling, well, you know. This went on for months after I begged him to stop drinking and stop hanging out with her, because he would constantly be gone with one of my so-called friends, which obviously ended up being his now friend instead, and always at her house, claiming to be too drunk to come home, so he stayed the night there regularly. It was the worst time of my life. His boss even offered to work me under the table, but he came up with excuses as to why he didn't want to work with me, and I found out he was even working side by side with her. Awesome. During these times, there were a ton of fights that got physical, and yes, I told him how much I hated him for the shit he was doing. But really, I felt like I loved him so much that I pleaded to make things work. I'm not the type to go through someone's phone and personal messages. This has traumatized me in the past, and I just don't do it. But he didn't have a lock screen on his phone, and previews of his messages would just pop up. We were sleeping in bed one night, and a message from her popped up, right as I was going to plug his phone in to charge it, saying something totally inappropriate. So I did what any woman would do and opened it. Holy shit. These messages went back for months and months, saying how he was ending things with me and wanted her but wasn't sure, and the kids and so on and so forth. I read things, took screenshots and pictures, went through everything when he was sleeping, and I mean everything. So I grudge-fucked him, woke him up, asked him if he was sleeping with her. Obviously, he lied to my face. I asked him, "What is this then?" and showed him the messages. He shrugged it off and tried going back to sleep like nothing happened, and it wasn't a big deal. This started a vicious cycle of separation, fighting, moving out, etc. Before he moved out the first time, someone who was staying here, who liked to start drama, showed me his direct messages to her and how he was going on a date with some tweaker bitch, and I started fuming. I don't know why. As things were obviously going to be over, but he still lived here, and I thought I had a right to be angry. During the beginning of COVID, I had about $6,000 that I wanted to devote to getting him dentures. His family has hereditary bad teeth, and they usually all fall out, or at least the majority, before they turn 30. He had a few rotten teeth left, so we went and got them pulled and I paid for dentures for him. Great waste of money now. He never wore his dentures, but after we were separating, he started wearing them, I think to impress girls. Well, I found out about this girl. I also learned that she was superficial and high maintenance. I knew he was counting on his dentures to make a good impression on his dates, so I took them. I went to work and put them in my locker. For the record, I work in a federal contract ammunition building facility, and it is super high security, using badges to get in and out of the gate. No public local phone numbers and security guards that patrol the facility. So, there was no way he was getting them back. When I came to work, I was laughing to myself, and some co-workers noticed. I'd been pretty down for several months, no smiles, nothing. So I told them what happened, and they nicknamed me Tooth Fairy. This was a year ago now, and nobody has forgotten. They still call me that. Many horrible things have happened since then, and currently we are fighting in a divorce. It has gotten really nasty, and I've done a few petty things since then, but this one, I believe, takes the cake. 3. My sister just reminded me about this story. It takes place in 2017. She and I were out for brunch and had a lovely time at an upscale rooftop restaurant in the heart of our city. You know, the kind with a full setting, cloth napkins and white tablecloth. The kind where a pancake entree has the word mélange and mimosas are $16. We had a great time, even though the service was a little rushed. We get it, Saturday brunch means a lot of tables with a speedy turnover. My sister had been a waitress all through college. We even joked about her applying for the weekend shifts since she'd make great tips. When it came time to settle the check, we noticed we had been charged for 2 coffees, which we didn't order nor receive. While handing the bill back, I asked that they be taken off. "Well, you got coffee." "I'm sorry, we actually didn't. See?" I show him the pristine, empty coffee cups. "No, there's 2 coffee cups on the table." "There are coffee cups on every table." At this point, he kind of huffs and rolls his eyes, says he doesn't have the authority to remove anything from the bill. Before I can ask for someone who can, he smirks and says the manager on duty just went on break, and we'd have to wait 30 minutes for her. But he'd be asking us to wait at the host stand, since they needed the table. My sister and I look at each other, and we both get the same idea. Well, okay, guess if we're being charged for coffee, I'll take a refill. "Oh, for me too. Can you bring cream and sugar?" It was at this moment he knew he fucked up. We spent another 20 minutes sipping coffee and keeping him from turning the table. We asked for refills once, and I asked if they had any raw sugar packets. By the end of it, he was pointedly ignoring us. We kinda giggled about it, and made a very dramatic show of flourishing my card, putting it in the booklet, and setting it upright. My sister even tried to flag him down, but he refused to look in our direction. We finished and hung around until he came back with his manager. He was smirking again. Big lips, that guy. I have to say that facial expression stayed with me. "Okay, you two. We have a seating time limit to allow our other guests the opportunity to eat with us. Will that be all today?" "Well, we've been waiting for you to take our check. I was trying to get your attention earlier, but you must have been busy." I offer him my card and the booklet, and I've never seen a human turn red so quickly. He mutters that he'll be right back and marches off to run it. While we were waiting, the manager asked us about our experience. We said we both had a great time and we'd be back, and relayed what happened. At least we ended up enjoying the coffee. We paid, left a decent tip, and skedaddled. But it felt good knowing he probably cost himself a ticket's worth of tips over $9 in coffee. 4. So, a bit of context. I live in Mexico, and we practice Catholicism. Those who didn't know, we have rituals called La Primera Comunión, First Communion, and La Confirmación, Confirmation, which every Catholic has to go through at some point of their lives after several semesters of Catecismo, Bible study. Usually people have to first get the First Communion before being able to do the Confirmation. If everything goes well, the person would have completed their confirmation at somewhere around 10 years old. The only problem is I was around 14 years old and an atheist. At this age I was just coming out to my family, but it's been a while since my dad's. My family wanted me so badly to do the First Communion, and were even pressuring me a bit, because I was already way behind. I hadn't had my confirmation due to a lot of moving out and other shenanigans, but I refused. They were rather surprised and started trying to convince me on doing it. After a few months of back and forth, they told me that my uncle, the favorite of my uncles, has never been someone else's godfather. Yes, we have a godfather and godmother in every event. And he wished to be someone's godfather so much, so I finally accepted, really just to please him. To be honest, I now see that it was just a dirty trick because my uncle took it very lightly, like cool level lightly. Anyway, I'm getting off track. We started preparing everything that I needed for the ceremony. The suit, flowers, a Bible, a place to hold the event, between other things. One of those were to confess, so we went to a big historical church in my town. We have lots of historical buildings from the Spanish colonization, and they're pretty impressive. My parents told me to go in and confess myself to the priest, so I did. I went in there, I met with the priest, and he took me to the back room with 2 chairs. He sat me down and asked me to confess my sins, and I let it out. It went something like this. Mind that this was about 8 years ago and my memory is a bit fuzzy. The priest with a calm and cordial tone began, "So tell me, what's wrong? What have you done?" Which I replied with, "I haven't really done anything. I'm just here because my parents told me to." The priest looked a little confused and asked, "So why would they tell you to come here if you've done nothing? You must have done something." I again talked and said, "No, not really. You see, I'm doing my first communion soon, and I was told that I needed to come here." The priest, now even more confused, asked, "Why are you getting your first communion this late?" Mind that I look way younger than my age, but it was still way too late for a kid to get the first communion, which was strange to see around these parts. I spoke, now a bit nervous. "Well, I don't really believe in God," and he cut me off with a somewhat angry shout. "What? You don't believe?" I was allowed to continue as he stared me down with an angry stare. "Well, no, I've doubted for a while, and I don't really believe that there is a God." The priest at this point was red. He looked like he wanted to rip my throat out, and then he just went off. "Do you think that this is a game, huh? How dare you set foot in my church if you don't believe?" He raises his hand. At the moment, I kind of felt that it was an incoming strike, but instead he aggressively pointed away. "Get out, and don't come back until you truly believe." Then I got up and kind of jogged, nervously walked outside the room, and closed the heavy wooden door on my way out. Then I just kind of chickened outside the church. I was both scared and couldn't believe I just did that. That was crazy. Yes, I felt both those things. I also felt a little bit bad. Anyway, I came back to the car after I switched the look of fear on my face into a fake smile. My parents asked me, "How was it?" And I told them, "Oh, the priest kicked me out." Both of my parents' jaws dropped. Their faces went red with both anger and embarrassment, I believe, and they said, "What?" I repeated, "Yeah, he kicked me out during confession." They asked with anger, "What did you say to him?" To which I replied, "The truth." They knew exactly what I was talking about. We stayed parked while they figured out what to do next, while scolding me from time to time. After a while, they took me to the house of a friend of theirs who was also a priest, and told me to go confess again, but this time to leave that stuff untouched. So I went in there. He asked me what did I do. I told him nothing. He was like, good enough." We sat there for a few minutes talking about something. I think it was cars and sports. While he was talking, I was nodding. Then I went back and told my parents that I did it. After that, I went to an event filled with 6-year-olds. I got my first communion, a free suit, and best of it all, the respect of my whole family. Now nobody questions my beliefs and or tries to force me into ceremonies of that nature. Not even my grandmother, and she is an extreme believer. So I'm pretty darn happy with how it went, though I still feel bad about the priest. I feel like he got caught in between the crossfire. He was just doing his job, I guess. 5. This story backs to the beginning of the 90s when I, 25 at the time, I'm also male, had to serve the mandatory period of 1 year in the army in my country. That was a thing everybody disliked, because basically you wasted your time being barely paid some $4 a day without getting anything in return other than some useless basic military training and guard duties and so on. So I decided to join a branch of the army which has powers of civilian police, MP, military force altogether, with the goal of at least doing something good for the community and to get a decent monthly payment in return. To explain, that means that you would simultaneously be a police officer and a military police officer, in addition to being a soldier. Not so easy to get picked for it, but I was more than qualified, so I got it. Taking into account that we served in a professional police force, as a sort of auxiliary reserve force that was employed on police and public order duties, always together with some professional police officers. Despite our rank was auxiliary police, we had the same power and gears of any other professional police officer, and we had full power to operate alone if that was the case. Now, the mandatory military service had 2 choices you could pick. One was to be a basic private, or choose to be a complement lieutenant, if you had the right requisites. I chose the first because being a lieutenant would mean serving during 18 months instead of 12, and at the time I said no thanks. Let's get it done, then back home. Many of you know how miserable your life in the military can be if you're of low rank, and you're unlucky to get the wrong commander. And of course, my platoon was assigned the most evil, idiotic, dumbass, 20-ish years old lieutenant you could imagine. Take into account that we were for the most part people who had good instruction and were smart enough to join a kind of elite force like the one we were in. Also, because you could postpone the mandatory military day until you got a university degree, that meant there were a lot of people with degrees among us. There were lawyers, MDs, architects, and so on. Of course, many of us were well beyond 25 years old, so a lot more adult and responsible than an entitled child like him. And in his opinion, all of us were just some horseshit because we were not at his rank level, and he treated us consequently. Want to go out of the base to see your family when off duty? Nope, permission denied because you have your shoes soled dirty. He would ask to check your personal gun and immediately ground you for 15 days because your gun has not to be given to others no matter what. Next time, accordingly, you don't give him the gun. Well then, you grounded because you disobeyed an order. Finish your duty in time with good results? Not for him. Go on night shift because you're lazy and stupid. You get the picture. He invented new and smart ways to just make our life a hell, with no reason except his sadistic satisfaction. As time goes by, he finishes his duty and gets back to civilian life, where he's just an entitled jerk with no power of any sort. And as time goes by, we finish our duty too, except 6 of us who decided to join the force and stay on duty indefinitely. I was one of them. So I stayed in the army, and was transferred a couple of months later to our country's capital, and just went on with my life doing my job until the glorious day, when I was on traffic patrol duty. A black car sped on a red light in a heavy trafficked urban boulevard with lots of pedestrians, right in front of my eyes. And whose job was it to decide if people got stopped or not? You bet it was yours truly. And who was the driver? You bet it was dumb lieutenant. To be clear, I didn't know it was him. I would have stopped the car anyway because the situation was very dangerous for pedestrians and other drivers. But when I approached the driver's side to ask for papers, I recognized him immediately, but he did not recognize me. You know how it works with his kind of entitled jerks. They simply don't care to remember the faces of their slaves. In my head I said, dude, you're gonna remember me for a long time when I'm done with you. And in my normal voice I said, good morning, sir, driver's license and car papers, please. Here you are, officer. Tucked inside the driver's license was a badge of a veteran Army Police Association. Without a blink, I gave it back to him, saying, this has nothing to do with driving, sir. Please hold it somewhere else. He was smirking in a kind of attempt to enhance some bro code and saying, I'm a retired colleague. And I responded in a full smile, yes, I perfectly know who you are. You are not retired. You just finished your military service. You served in, and I told him the name of the town, and I was serving under you. Don't you recognize me? If I had hit the guy with a loaded truck, I couldn't have hurt him that badly. When he realized the kind of nightmare he was entering, having in front of him a police officer whose life was ruined by him, and having broken traffic rules, his face turned from a smile to despair in less than a second. He knew he was in deep shit, and he would be fined for red light and speeding. But what he didn't know was how deep that was, because you see, he didn't know that despite what he said to my face multiple times that I was just a perfect nobody with no rank, I was good at my job. So what I did was my job properly, nothing more. And I went to check very thoroughly for every single issue he could have had in the car. Speeding? Check. $100 fine. Red light? Check. Another $88 fine. Ooh, no use of safety belt. Check. $95 fine. Dangerous driving in a town street. Check. $155 fine. Tires not properly maintained. Check. $45. And so on and on and on, until he was begging me to stop. But you know, when he said, I guess I've learned my lesson now, I told him it was nothing personal. I'm just a perfect nobody with no rank, so I just have to abide and apply the law. And went on and on and on. When I finished, a long time after, believe me, he was finished too. So I told him I should just confiscate your car and tow it with an additional $2,500 fine, but I'm not an asshole who takes advantage of his power. Let me just give you the best regards of my fellow platoon mates and show off. That night, I don't know why, I slept very, very well, with a smile on my face. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge's Ice Cream, episode 242. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Please slap the like button before you go if you'd be so kind. Thank you very much, and various other words. Like legume. Legume's a good word. Don't use it enough. Kind of hard to fit into a sentence. I'm rambling, I'm sleep deprived. Anyway, legume. There we are. So, let's see. I don't think there's any special business today, so we'll move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, what is something you always want until you get it or it happens, and then you remember all the bad sides and you wish it would just kind of go away for a while? Like, snow is really pretty when it first falls, then you have to go outside, and then you fall on your butt, which is no fun. Let me know what your answers are if you pop them in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.